Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patar. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347, and we trust that you had a good long weekend. Well, one of the biggest news to come, if not the biggest news to come over the weekend, was that of Pope Francis, who died at the age of 88 following a prolonged illness. Now, this happened yesterday, and just the day before, he had delivered his Easter Sunday address at the St. Peter's Square in the Vatican City. But the Roman Catholic Church leader was known for his solidarity with Palestine, being one of the very few, if not just one, of a senior figure from a religious body from a global perspective to go ahead and call not just for a ceasefire, but for the rights of Palestinians to be respected. Joining me now, I'd like to welcome Reverend Frank Chikane, who is the chair of the Anti-Apartheid Steering Committee. Reverend, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Yeah, thank you very much, and to your listeners and those who are watching.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I think, Reverend, you and I spoke back in November, if I stand to be corrected, and you had said that it took a lot of not just guts, but the sense of bravery, the sense of calling it for what it is, when the Pope had said that what is happening in Gaza is tantamount to a genocide. When you look, of course, 5 months later to his passing, it really does show of a man who was willing to say, this cannot continue in Gaza. And it speaks of the character that Pope Francis was, wasn't it?
Well, we must give credit to him. I did say so whilst he was alive. I'm saying it because he passed away. But he took a stand at the time when nobody within the religious sector was able to take that step. Firstly, he was able to say that it is injustice what was happening in Gaza. And as time went by, being in contact with the people in Gaza and talking to priests on a daily basis, I was told he reached a conclusion that this is actually genocide. And there's nothing actually that can fight otherwise. Any person who honest and takes the Convention on Genocide seriously, that is happening in Palestine, it now gone beyond Gaza. It's actually genocide. It fits all the definitions you can have, but the reality is that this world is racist, and Europe and the United States operates on the basis that Palestinians are not human beings. And one of those officials in Washington actually said that there is no such a thing as a Palestinian. And so they don't consider them as human beings. All of them signed up as state parties to the Convention on Genocide, and anybody who assists Israel is actually committing genocide. But the convention goes further. It says that those who are state parties to this convention must make sure it doesn't happen. So it's not a question of not assisting, but in terms of assisting Israel to commit genocide, it's because it's also that if you do nothing, you are actually violating convention. And we're shocked. Many people are shocked that this Western world, with all the power, support Israel to commit these atrocities and crimes against humanity. And this is the time for us to stand. And we must thank the Pope for taking a stand on behalf of the Catholic Church and his Christian denomination. In fact, almost half of the Christian population is actually Catholic. And so it has a lot of influence. But obviously, it's not a political entity. It can take action, but their moral word is very critical.
That's where I want to touch on, Reverend, the morality of a lot of what he had said. You've mentioned it. The Catholic Church is not a political entity. It's there to serve, of course, a religious purpose. But it takes a lot out of such an important man that was Pope Francis to say, well, the world cannot continue the way it is right now. You cannot have fighter jets flying over Gaza, dropping bombs, dropping tons of bombs, seeing women and children starve, because right now, as we speak, Israel is not allowing any aid to enter into Gaza. And he also mentioned that if we as humans allow this to occur, then we are as complicit as the Israeli leadership. And for somebody like Pope Francis to say that, that in itself reverberated around the world, didn't it? And it shook the very core of what us as humans had to be. And Reverend, I'm sure that is something that you share also, holding such an important position as what you have right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I give him credit. You know, most of the churches have Western origins and therefore get influence by the Western way of thinking. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church is in Italy, in a state of the Catholic Church, Vatican state. But the European way of thinking influences a lot of the church. And his stance was breaking out of a traditional position that churches take. I mean, even the World Council of Churches is affected by the same constraint. And we need to really thank him for living this testimony, as I call it, of standing for the truth and speaking the truth and embarrassing these political leaders who have become accomplices to committing genocide in Gaza. And from where I stand, we need to mobilize the world. And I'm hoping that the successor to the Pope, Francis, will actually hold that front, because they are they are ahead of most religious entities globally, and they should continue to take that position. And they can mobilize the Catholics internationally to say no to what is happening. And I believe that will make a difference. But we need to mobilize everybody globally, and that's what the movement I'm leading in South Africa is about. We want to mobilize civil society, governments that are sympathetic, to take a stand and embarrass these nuclear powers that are having all the power, but leave this and support genocide against the Palestinians. We want to do what was done for South Africa, and that's why we are taking the leadership as South Africans. That during our time fighting apartheid, which was supported by the same superpowers, the Americans, the British, the French, the Germans, in the main, supported the apartheid system. They are supporting the Israeli settler colonial system. And we need to do exactly the same as we did during that time. The anti-apartheid movement, which became a global movement, was established in almost every country around the world to mobilize within their countries, because that's the key issue. To mobilize in the United States, mobilize in Britain, France, Germany, so that the people of those countries should take a stand against their own governments to stop what they are doing, which is genocide. And I would like to say now, no one must ever say, as they did with the Jews, that they never knew. I mean, Europe committed genocide against the Jews, who are now doing it against Palestinians. I mean, Jewish Zionists. It's not all the Jews who do it, but it's Jewish Zionists in particular, who claim to be speaking on behalf of Jews, and the Jews internationally, globally, are saying not in our name. Even within Israel, there are 10% of the Jews there who are saying, not in our name, we can't accept that. But we need the superpowers who are supporting Israel to stop the sport and stop them from committing this genocide. And that's what we are looking for. And we are hoping to mobilize people in the United States, as we did against the apartheid regime, to take us.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Reverend Frank Chikane. We're going to, of course, be speaking on the late Pope Francis, who, of course, passed away yesterday, but his solidarity with Palestine and Gaza. I'll have more for you after this break. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Reverend Frank Chikane, discussing the late Pope Francis and, of course, his solidarity with the people of Palestine. You know, I watched yesterday on Al Jazeera, Reverend Chikane, when somebody you know very well, Dr. Reverend Munter Isaac, who's, of course, a Palestinian pastor also, and he said that his ability to get many, not just the Christian ministers or pastors, but also the Muslim Maulanas, the Jewish rabbis, to come together and say, this needs to stop. It's very rare that you find, the three big major religions coming together and really standing in solidarity for Palestine. Of course, we saw that with many of the conferences that were held last year and the year before, Reverend, where you were part of, that this coming together was so important to say, stop Israel, you can't commit this. And the Pope emphasized on that. And that's the beauty of human beings, isn't it, Reverend, that they could get together and really call out ethnic cleansing, genocide, in which Israel currently is perpetrating on the people of Gaza.
Yeah, that's our experience in South Africa, because the apartheid system oppressed all of us. Muslims, Christians, as long as if you were black, Jewish people were also victims because they got detained, tortured with us because they stood against the apartheid system. In South Africa, it's easier to bring the Jewish, Muslim, Christians to take a stand together. And you see that within the South African chapter of the anti-apartheid movement. We have got all those religious traditions represented and working together. What we need is the global movement of these religious groups to stand together. When we visited Palestine 2 years ago, after the war started, we visited Bethlehem, Jerusalem, as a delegation, international delegation. And I said to them, we need religious leaders, Christian, Muslims, and Jewish top leaders to go to Israel and say, stop this. And we were planning at that time to go through the border from Egypt into Gaza, and couldn't get permission to even start from Egypt into Gaza, from the capital city there. And so we need this stance together. As I'm saying, and in South Africa, we used to have progressive Jewish rabbis. Unfortunately, at the present moment, we don't have a progressive Jewish rabbi. He's a thoroughly Zionist rabbi. But the Jewish communities in South Africa are taking a stand. They are saying, not in our name. And I think we need to do more of this. I have just read about a first conference against Zionism by Jewish people who are in the Judaic faith, who are going to take a stand by June this year to say, not in our name. And the problem about this is that every day Palestinians are being killed. It's now happening in the West Bank. And we must get this stopped. The UN can't do anything because the United States would veto everything that goes through. So we need the United States of America to be made to change their position. stop supporting this genocide. And the Pope was one of those who was able to speak to them. We don't know what happened with the last visit they paid to the Pope. I've not seen any reports about it, and sure he would have told them that you must stop this genocide. Can't continue.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, Reverend Chikane, given that the man currently leading the White House is Donald Trump. And yeah, I think the less said, the better when it comes to him in terms of reasonable thinking. We hope that his mind could change, but I think the proof is in the pudding when it comes to him. Reverend, another aspect when it came to the Pope was his ability to speak this truth to power when it came to Gaza. Many of the right-wing Israelis called him anti-Semitic. Many of them said that he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. But for a Pope really to shrug off a lot of that controversy was important, wasn't it? So that he could stand apart from the rest and say, what is happening cannot occur in the modern world. And that spoke of the character that he was, wasn't he, Reverend? Is that something that you would remember of Pope Francis, his ability to shrug off criticism and allow for this truth to be spoken and for there to be this awareness of what is currently happening in Gaza?
Well, he's unique in this regard. I mean, not all popes have taken the position he has taken. And he must have been under enormous pressure. Remember that the Vatican also works as a state, and it has got diplomats who represent them in various countries. And there would have been a lot of pressure, as we are having that pressure put on South Africa now. He would have been under enormous pressure. But I think he took his faith seriously, his commitment to the cause of justice, and that the people in Gaza are part of his congregation, if you have to use that language, and that they were brutalized on a day-to-day basis. As a pastor of the people and members of the Catholic Church, he had to take a stand, and we appreciate that. But also it helped to really destroy this myth and propaganda by Israel that, there is anti-Semitism, people are against them, and that anybody who critique them for their injustices and violence and killings of Palestinians must be anti-Semitic. I mean, we have crossed that bridge already. We're not prepared to be told by Zionists that we are anti-Semitic. In fact, they are anti-Semitic and killing people who come from the Semite tradition or generation. And so they cannot make that claim. You can't use that to justify injustice. Indeed, no one must be against Jews just because they are Jews. Like they should not be against any American just because they are Americans, or South Africans just because they are South Africans. But it must be the issue of justice. Do unto others as you would that they do to you. You can't kill people the way they are killing it. I mean, they are really saying to the Palestinians, you don't belong here. Leave, as one of those ministers said. You leave or submit or you die. And they starve them and stop food going there. I mean, what type of world are we in? What type of people live in Britain and France and Germany and the United States? Wouldn't take a stand and say, you can't starve people to death who have not done anything. I mean, these are children, women who have not done anything to anybody, but you starve them. And the Pope was very clear. As I'm saying, he was a good pastor. As far as I know, he used to be in contact with his religious leaders within that context. As you also know that they bombed their schools, hospitals, and churches. The Israelis have really crossed the line.
Mm.
I don't know how the Western world would ever be able to justify this.
Reverend,
And in sense, yeah.
Reverend, sorry, I have to stop you there. Unfortunately, we have come to the end. I wish we could take this conversation more. But as always, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
That's Reverend Frank Chikane, who is the chair of the Anti-Apartheid Steering Committee, discussing Pope Francis and his solidarity and standing with the people of Palestine. After the break, are we going to come back home to discuss a Institute of Race Relations report, a poll that has come out looking ahead to next year's local government elections. Do stay tuned.